Welcome to the Sports Lunatics. And who are the Sports Lunatics? Well, we're just two regular guys who love sports history. Hi, I'm Shawn Lavigne in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And I'm Howie Mooney here in Barrie, Ontario.
And we are the Sports Lunatics. And Howie, great to see you. We've had a bit of a summer hiatus due to, well, it's being summer and we're doing summer things. But we have a lot of exciting news on this episode of the Sports Lunatics. I am actually looking at this. We've been doing this now for, wow, almost 3 years. A bit of
Almost
a relaunch.
Almost four
Well,
now,
yes,
actually.
4 years now. Time flies, Howie, when you're having fun.
Is that what we've been having?
We have a lot of eggs in baskets right now. We're really hoping to present more interesting content for the Sports Lunatics. We actually have a brand new website or blog, if you want to call it. It's still an in thing, folks. And it's the sportslunatics.com. You may have noticed on our Facebook group page, which we've had going for years, that we've had snippets of Howie's great work and sort of some interesting tidbits each day all through the week. We've just sort of done a soft launch. But now we are announcing that thesportslunatics.com is up and running. And please check it out if you're a fan of the show, or even if you're not. But if you want sports history, some interesting articles, and again, we are going to provide more and more content on that page. We're really excited about that. But first of all, Howie, how you doing?
I'm great, Shawnee. It's great to see you too. I hope the weather's not going to hurt you too much.
Yes, for anybody wondering, that as the day we're recording at this very second, Hurricane Lee, which is actually now a tropical cyclone. I don't know what sounds worse, a hurricane or a cyclone, is hitting Nova Scotia and parts of the eastern seaboard. So,
Those cyclones are scary, Shawnee, because they only have one eye and you don't know where they're looking.
Oh, wow. It's already started, folks. It's already started. Missed you, pal. But yeah, so we're hopefully going to be able to get through this without any incident, because there have been some power outages and whatnot at the time of this taping. So we've got a lot of things to catch up, sort of going over, and it seems like, unfortunately, we talk about a lot of we celebrate people's lives because they have passed away. We've lost so many greats this summer. The first one I want to get into is honestly one of the great hockey voices, one of the most unique and entertaining hockey voices of our generations. That's Rick Jeanneret, the longtime Sabres voice, who worked for the club for 51 years, called some of their most memorable games, memorable moments, and one of the most distinctive voices in hockey broadcasting history.
You know, when you talk about voices that make you comfortable when you're driving the car, I used to love the times when I was living in Pickering. My son was living with his mom in Barrie, and I dropped my son off up there and then be driving home. And I could pick up the Sabres games all the way down the Highway 400 and listening to Rick Jeanneret and whoever he was with, in the booth. There was something just that was comfortable about listening to him do hockey games. I can't put it into words better than that. But yeah, there's a comfort feeling about Rick Jeanneret's voice and just listening to him do hockey.
When there is a great play or a big moment in a hockey game, there's only a handful of guys that I have grown up with that can make it so electric. Now, let's be honest, Rick Jeanneret was a home-based broadcaster. He broadcasted the Sabres for 51 years. So, his calls for the visiting team may not be as exciting, but I'm telling you, whether you're a Sabres fan or not, just the way he would call a game, especially in the playoffs, it was just something to, when I was at the NHL Network in 2005 on XM radio, we got we got to list all the games from across the league and the highlights and whatnot. And it was always, you know, when I was putting together the highlight packages for our morning show, it was so exciting to hear Rick's call, you know, when we had the Sabres home feeds, because we always took the home feeds at that time. And just, you know, some of the moments and just some of just the emotion, whether you are a Sabres fan or not, you were entertained. And that's the highest compliment I can give the man, is that he always entertained you, no matter whether it was game 30 or if it was the seventh game of a playoff series.
He had that unique voice, and you played at the top of the show the Mayday call. But I mean, La 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 Fontaine, Pominville, all that stuff, you know, all the Rick Jeanneretisms. And the thing is, his voice was so unique too that you immediately knew who you were listening to. And nothing against young broadcasters, because we were all young at one time. We all had to break into the business, but he had his own niche in the business. You knew right away. He didn't have to identify himself. You knew as soon as you turned the dial over to whatever the station was that he was on, you knew it was Rick Jeanneret.
Absolutely. You mentioned a couple of the calls. Danny Briere, Danny Briere. The Jason Pominville, which was a heartbreaker being a Sens fan, but game 7 of that series in
Yeah.
overtime, you know, these guys are good, scary good. And I'm sorry if you're a Jeanneret fan, you just heard that, but that's, you know, when I heard the call that next morning, or that Monday morning, I think it was a weekend game, the next show that we had, you know, as much as it was a heartbreaker as a Sens fan, I loved the call. The call was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was so great. Unfortunately, I never got to. I'd been producing shows where we had Rick as a guest. I never actually got to meet him personally, unfortunately, which would have been a thrill. But it was when he passed, going through the archives of just his great calls. But here's the story I'm going to tell you that related to what we were doing at XM Radio. So when we launched in 2005, 2006 season, so that was sort of the new era of the NHL. We had just gone through the dead
Right.
puck era. And Buffalo, you know, at the time weren't really considered, you know, that they were going to be a threat. Well, suddenly they put together a really exciting young team,
They had a
you
pretty good
know,
goalie too.
what's that?
They had a pretty good goalie too.
Oh, absolutely. But after that, you know, that work stoppage, uh, you know, they took the league by storm and they were
Mm-hmm.
doing really well. And so that Christmas, as a fundraiser, they were selling a CD, if you remember what a CD was, kids, of Rick Jeanneret's greatest calls up to that time. And so Mayday and everything we've talked about was on it. And I had this idea, and I was working with, I called him the paper boy, Aaron Papernick, who was my technical producer of the morning show. And I was like, what would be cool? Let's take the 12 days of Christmas
Oh,
and intertwine it with Rick Jeanneret's greatest calls and call it the 12 days of Jeanneret. So we worked on it for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, and we were finding, because there were so many great
yeah.
calls, it was really hard to just narrow down 12. But you know, we came up with a list and we put it together, and you know, it was fun for us to do. I loved that. That was the one thing I loved about XM. We could pretty much do anything creatively, and if it hit, great. If it missed, okay, we gave it a shot. But I still to this day have no idea who did this, but YouTube was really in its infancy. Social media was in its infancy then. So we went on YouTube. Aaron was more of the technical savvy guy than I was. And he's like, "Have you seen what's on YouTube?" I'm like, "No." I said, I might have said, "What's YouTube?" But so he's like, somebody actually took video of all the calls we took and took the audio, essentially stripped took the audio of the 12 Days of Jeanneret
Yeah.
and then put video to it. And again, that was back in 2005, 6 season. And I think it's up to 50,000 hits or something on
Wow.
YouTube. I've always, to this day, I still don't know who did it. I got a kick out of reading the comments because people are like, "Who put this together?" And it's like, where did this come from? Uh, by the way, he never really gave us credit, but that's okay. That's fine.
That would bother me though. But anyway.
Well, at the time, it was just cool because hey, we had a listener. That was nice because we were so new.
Yeah.
But when I think of Rick Jeanneret, I always think of the 12 Days of Jeanneret from my early broadcasting days, and it was a lot of fun,
Oh, I'm
and
sure.
had a great time. Next one that we'll want to talk about, Howie, and you're listening to the Sports Lunatics show, and you can still find us on the Fired Up Network. Again, the sportslunatics.com is the place where you want to check out our latest posts. Howie's got some amazing articles, and hopefully we'll have time in this show to get to talk about it. If not, we are going to do a bonus video specifically for the website that we will post as well. But Bobby Baun, Howie, legendary, best known for his years with the Toronto Maple Leafs dynasty team. And I do call them a dynasty team that won 4 cups in the 60s. And of course, the story, and I'll let you talk about it, was from the 1964 Stanley Cup, where his name became legendary.
The first time I heard about that story was watching Peter Puck on the Sunday afternoon. I don't know if it was CBS or NBC hockey broadcasts, but Casey Kasem doing the voice of Peter Puck talking about Bobby Baun and his broken leg, broken tibia or fibula or whatever it was.
And of course,
playing on it.
Just to back on that too, of course, Brian McFarlane, legendary broadcaster here in Canada, and author, historian, you name it, wonderful man, was the creator of Peter Puck.
Yeah, and you met, well, not to talk about Brian McFarlane, but you met Brian McFarlane one time, and his story is incredible. We should do a show on Brian McFarlane.
Well, we will, and I hope Brian's out there listening at some point, because he made a huge impact on my career as well. Just getting to know him the many times that we crossed paths, and reading his books as you did. Was always a treat.
Bobby Baun, the most goals Baun ever scored in a season was 8. But as you said, his most famous goal was the goal that he scored in the 64 Stanley Cup final. And against Detroit, April 23rd, he didn't break his tibia or fibula, as I said earlier. It was his ankle that he broke. But he came back, got it all taped up, came back in overtime, and then, the slapper from the point went in, and sometimes they just go in. And that's what we learned. What I learned later, and what we've all learned later, is that everybody plays with something in the playoffs. It doesn't matter. You're always banged up. You're always hurt. But to play on a broken ankle and have it frozen, taped up, and how do you put your foot in the boot of your skate like that? It would just kill to do that.
Well, it's called adrenaline, number one.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the pain after, we're talking 1964, where the medical technology
it was rocks. They hit it with a rock.
Yeah, but I'm not going to be that get off my lawn type of guy, but players back then, they were tough. They just seemed to play through any injury, no matter what.
Well, the thing is, at that time, there were 6 teams. There were 120 jobs. You didn't want to lose your job. I remember right. Marcel Pronovost saying one time, he was a tough guy. He was clean, but he could be tough when he wanted to be. And he said, "There's no way I want to go down to the minors, because that's where the real dirty, tough guys are. And I don't want to have to fight with them."
It's very guys true. And let's be honest, in that era, guys had day jobs or summer jobs. And and playing for a guy like Punch Imlach, that tells you all you need to know.
Why do you think Tim Horton started a donut shop?
It's
And I'm
true.
serious about that.
No, you're very true. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the whole thing. It's people today cannot relate to that.
No.
They can't fathom, considering the amount of money players are making, and whether you're the fourth liner, or you're still making a good living each year. But
Sure.
back then, even the star players, they had day jobs, or they
Yeah.
worked, or you know, they would make money off advertisements and product. They would pump products, but
Yeah.
they had jobs in the summer to support their families. Like it's
They had
totally
to. I mean,
different.
and you look at CFL guys back then, they all had day jobs and then they go practice in the afternoon or at night. And
Absolutely, it's crazy. No, it's a whole different era that a lot of people just can't fathom today, um, and don't really care. And that's part of why we do the show, is to educate people sometimes, because it's not an us versus the younger generation. It's
the
just,
kids today.
yeah, yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. We do it enough for the kids today. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Moving forward, because we try to keep these podcasts to a good time. Gilles Gilbert,
Oh, yeah.
and it's funny, when I heard the news, I was devastated from the standpoint of, he was 74, but it never felt like he would. He always looked like he was 20, 30 years younger than what he really was.
He
And when he
did.
played, he looked like he was a 12-year-old. And his body, you looked at the video of his performance, just how he played goal. He was a stick.
You look at all the guys back then, the equipment that they used to wear, and I used to wear it too in the 70s. The upper body equipment, it was like paper. It was like wearing a couple of newspapers over your body. And I remember John Davidson talking one time. He was walking around without his shirt on in the dressing room after a game, and he had all these bruises all over his upper body. And the team doctor looked at him and asked him if he was in need of like cancer treatment or something. And I'm not joking about that. He said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I remember getting shots on the upper forearm, close to my elbow, where that nerve is, and God, my arms would be bruised up terribly. But Gilles Gilbert, we all know where he played and where he was in Boston. When Guy Lafleur scored his goal. But I can remember in the 90s, late 90s, a buddy of mine asked me to play. I was a goalie, and goalies are often in demand. So he asked me to go play in this tournament in Brossard, Quebec, South Shore of Montreal. And it was a nice tournament. It was a good tournament. It was Easter weekend. The Friday morning, they would give us ice time for a practice, and the practice would be run by an ex-NHL player. Our practice was run by Gilles Gilbert. And I get on the ice, and I'm doing my stretching, as I always did, or always tried to do. And he comes over to me, hits me on the pad with his stick and says, "How do you want to do this?" And I'm thinking, like, you're asking me how I want to do this? I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. I said, honestly, I just like to see the puck. I just want to track the puck and be able to see it. He hits me on the pads again. He says, "No problem. We'll do that." And then he says, "Okay, everybody in the middle here," but he was so good. And then after the practice was over, I was skating off with him, and I said, I don't mean to bring this up, but I was a Montreal fan, and when Guy Lafleur scored that goal on you, I was happy. He says, "Thanks for bringing that up." And he hits me on the pads again, and he starts laughing. He says, it's part of my career. It's there. Everybody's seen it. It just is what it is. And
Yeah, but the thing was, Howie, if you look at the series as a whole, Boston was right there with the Habs. Like, that series could have gone just as easily to the Bruins.
Well, you look at that Boston team. How many 20-goal scorers did they have? I think they had 11.
They had tons.
Yeah,
but
they had a lot of.
But it wasn't just that. It was like, he was really good. Like, there were games where Montreal, they were the elite team. That was, part of their dynasty. And, he was matching Dryden. And honestly, Dryden you know, Dryden wasn't that great in that series, but Gilbert was stellar. Some of the
He was.
saves, I've seen on YouTube, going back to that series were incredible. Like he was acrobatic,
Yeah.
and I don't want to compare. I'm not saying he was Dominic Hasek, but he had that sort of, you're literally going to have to kill me to score today.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
that's how it felt.
But
Uh,
that's mental toughness. That's what it is. And having been a goalie for 45 years in my life till I had my hip replaced, it takes mental toughness. You have to have a feeling in your mind that you are invincible. Nobody's going to score on you. Nobody's going to get a puck past you. And screw them. I don't care. I'm gonna stifle them. I'm gonna frustrate them. I'm gonna do everything I can to stop that puck. And that's what Gilles Gilbert was like. A lot of guys back then, uh, there was no single style the way there is today. There were a few guys that played somewhat of a butterfly, like Tony Esposito, but guys played their own style. There weren't goalie coaches back then like there are today that kind of make everything uniform and everything kind of cookie cutter. It was all guys they had personality. They had that thing of their own that made them who they were. And Gilles Gilbert, like I was like you, when I heard that he passed away, I was devastated too.
yeah, it was shocking.
It felt like
Again,
it felt like he was like it felt like he was the same age as me. That's what that, I mean, and he wasn't. He was older than me, but watching
right.
him play, it felt like the other day instead of however long ago.
Yeah, no, it was sad. It was funny. Well, Bobby Baun, there's always that connection, working in it with, in the Toronto
Yeah.
and just all the connections there to guys. So that was a hard one. Jeanneret was devastating, but there was something about Gilles Gilbert because, that was one of the first series I remember watching as a kid growing
Yeah.
up that sort of had an impact. Like it was like, that was an unbelievable series, the Bruins and the Habs in '79, and whoever won that series was winning the cup. Didn't
Yeah.
matter who they were going to play in the next round. It felt that, and the Bruins, we know what happened with too many men and
Yeah.
Lafleur scoring, but it certainly wasn't Gilles Gilbert's fault.
No, but I'll never forget Lemaire entering the zone, drops the
Oh,
puck back. Lemaire or Lafleur coming in full speed, bang, and
they the quaff going, buddy. The
yeah.
quaff going.
Oh,
Yeah, it was great.
having been in
Uh,
Montreal in the Forum to see Lafleur play
oh,
back in the early '80s,
yeah.
to see him when he'd get rolling, you'd feel that buzz in the crowd. And I know we're running out of time. We got to go, but I just wanted to mention that.
No, and I want to talk further at another point about that because even on TV, every time he touched the puck, you've heard the excitement,
Mm-hmm.
and you were excited watching
Oh,
every Saturday night.
you're
Like it was
just getting
special.
yourself ready for something exciting to happen, something great to happen, and when it does, the lid blows off the Forum.
Special. Last one, Howie. We'll do it real quick. Gil Brandt passed away at 91, and if you don't know who Gil Brandt is, uh, Pro Football Hall of Fame executive, but a lot of his techniques with the Cowboys was with the Cowboys forever. Um, was he helped reshape how scouts looked at players, and a lot of the practices you see for scouting, that's all Gil Brandt, and the impact that he had on the NFL was very significant. And it's funny, any sort of NFL films type of video where you're looking back to, football in the 50s, 60s, 70s, Gil Brandt's in pretty much every video
Yeah,
because, he crossed, many decades in the National Football League. But Gil Brandt passed away in 91, legendary executive.
he was one of the very first guys to look at players and be able to quantify their abilities, in such a way that he could rank his choices in terms of draft picks from one to whatever. He was one of the first guys to do that. Now, sometimes it could come back to bite him, but he was one of those first guys that kind of not, I wouldn't call it analytics, but it was kind of analytics, primitive analytics for that time, for what we would look at today. But yeah, he was one of those guys who revolutionized the front office and the scouting systems of teams throughout the league. And it's a copycat league. All sports are copycat sports. Everybody does what the successful teams do, and teams started to do what Gilles Brandt was doing as well, or tried to do what Gilles Brandt was doing.
And look at the success they had in the,
Oh,
late 60s, 70s, dominated.
yeah.
They were the team. They were America's team, and he was a big part of that for
There's
sure.
a book that I don't know if it's still around, if you can find it, but I remember reading it in 1990. It was by Skip Bayless, back before Skip Bayless, when he was just a columnist for one of the papers in Dallas. I think it was the Morning News, but it's called God's Coach, and it kind of lays to rest a lot of the myths about Tom Landry and about the Dallas Cowboys at the time, and there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of dirt in there too, that he was able to dig up. And I mean, I'm sure not surprised that Skip Bayless, but it was before Skip Bayless was Skip Bayless, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Howie, we're running out of time. Again, the Sports Lunatics.com website, blog, whatever you want to call it, whatever the
I call
cool
it a
kids
website.
want to say.
I like to call it a website.
Exactly. It's up and running. Lots of articles up there already. We're always looking for your input. Again, on every article, there's a comment section, so you can
Yeah.
respond to each column. We always are looking for show suggestions or topics. Howie, the other thing I want to plug before we end the show, first of all, you are an acclaimed sports author. Thank you very much.
Where? Who said that? Who said
That's
that?
you. That is you. So tell us about the book that's out now and the exciting news coming up.
Well, Crazy Days and Wild Nights came out beginning of March, and it was wonderful, the reception that the book got. And even to this day, the other day, a woman where I work, she got a copy for her father, and she says, "My dad loves your book. He can't put it down. He loves the stories. He loves everything that you write." A neighbor of mine told me that she got a copy for was it for her dad, and then the uncle was looking at it and he couldn't put it down, so she had to get a copy for her uncle. It's been wonderful. Did a signing event in Ottawa back in March, and I was shocked, pleasantly shocked at the number of people that, first of all, remembered who I was, and secondly, turned out, for that book signing event. But the other one's coming out. It'll be out, I think, middle to end of October. It's called More Crazy Days and Wild Nights. I know it's very original, but I'm hoping that the reception for that book is as popular, as wonderful as the reception was for the first one.
Well, I just want to say what I love about your first book, and I know what I'm going to love again about the second book. It's different events, it's different moments. Some you may know, and some you may not know. And as a sports history buff that we are, and that I am, that's what I love about the concept. It's not just one sport, it's not just one team, it's not just one event. It crosses the board, and you capture all those moments and those crazy times perfectly. And kudos to you, my friend.
I appreciate that, Shawnee. A woman that I know picked up the book a couple of weeks ago, and she's an avid reader, but she's not a sports fan. And she messaged me and said, she's like almost like screaming through her message, I read your book cover to cover, and I started with the last chapter because it's on Walter Gretzky and stories about Walter Gretzky, and she says, I started with that one and I read the whole thing, and she says, you must continue writing, you must never stop writing, and that blew me away too.
Well, I'll tell you, you've influenced me and really, sort of helped me figure out what I want to do next in my career. And a lot of exciting things ahead for both of us.
Yeah.
I know. Again, the sportslunatics.com, check it out. And technology and live webcam, my camera just fell over.
Oh, no.
But again, you can find us on the Fired Up Network. We will have bonus content, and look for that as well on the sportslunatics.com. Go to Amazon, look for Howie's books. All the information is on the website as well. I'm Shawn Lavigne in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
I'm Howie Mooney in Barrie, Ontario.
And you've been listening to the Sports Lunatics. Have a great sports day.